Welcome everyone to our webinar on sales questioning skills. We're going to get started in about 30 seconds. Just waiting for folks to join. While you're joining and while we're waiting to get started, please enter your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. We want to hear from you today. So look forward to seeing who's on. Welcome, Carrie from Denver. We got Chicago, we got Mexico, Switzerland. Corey, we are international.
I love it.
Ireland, Minneapolis, yes. Right down the road in Columbia, South Carolina. Welcome, welcome. This is phenomenal. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, as you're joining, please tell us your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. And I want to, again, just welcome everyone to our webinar on sales questioning skills that win more deals. This must be a hot topic because we are expecting a huge crowd today. Just to let you all know, we are recording this, and so this will be sent out this week. So you will get the recording. And today we're going to talk about sales questioning skills. We're going to share some data on the power of sales questions. We're going to discuss effective questioning approaches, best practice questioning skills and strategies, and we're going to provide some insight into how to coach these skills as well. I am super excited that Corey McKizzie is joining me today. Corey is our Director of Sales Effectiveness. If you were on our value selling webinar back in September, then you know that you are in for a treat because Corey brings more than 20 years of experience in sales performance improvement and coaching across a wide range of industries. She has held a range of sales management, consulting positions, including Chief Sales Officer. And we are thrilled to have her impart her wisdom, her stories, her passion for sales. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. I am excited to be here, and this is a fantastic topic and so important, so necessary.
Yes, absolutely. So critical to the really being successful in sales, and we're going to talk to you more about that as we go. Please also, if you have questions or comments, add comments to the chat, throw us your questions in the Q&A. We're going to try to reserve some time at the end to cover questions, but we're also going to try to address those as we go. So want to see you interact with us, want to see those questions throughout our session. So let's dig in. All right, so first of all, effective questioning influences sales goal attainment. We recently released a sales leader trend report, and it has all kinds of data around 2024 sales leader priorities and trends in B2B seller capabilities. And if you're interested in looking at that report, check out our website. You can download it there. And so one of the things that we asked was how teams, in which phases of the sales process, sales teams struggled the most. And this was a survey of senior leaders, so CEOs, chief sales officers, senior vice presidents of sales leaders. And 59% of our sales leaders indicated that their underperforming teams struggled with discovery and questioning. So what do we mean by underperforming teams? Underperforming teams missed their revenue goals in the previous year compared to successful teams who met or exceeded those goals. So again, 59% of underperforming teams struggle with discovery and questioning. So this is a really critical component to hitting your sales goals. Thoughts on that, Corey?
So I'm thinking about the different programs that I have facilitated or companies that I've done consulting work for. And one of the big conversations that they have, of course, in terms of how can they make their numbers and meet their revenue goals is how can they get more share of wallet? And it all goes down to discovery questions where they end up doing the show up and throw up, right? So the feature benefit conversation and not really digging deeper and getting to the need. So this makes complete sense that that 59% are underperforming because of lack of discovery and questioning. What we also find out is I tell my training participants this often is tenure is so powerful. The more you know, the longer you've been in a position, tenure is a blessing, but tenure is also a curse because you assume you know how the sale is going to end, or you assume you know what the customer wants to do, and therefore you ask one or two questions and you rush to the end deal. So we've got to slow down in order to get the best result.
I think that's a fabulous point. I think, just because you're experienced, or as for all of you sales leaders out there, just because your teams are experienced doesn't mean that they're necessarily asking the best questions. And that can have an impact on their closing rates.
100%.
All right, let's take a look at the most effective questioning strategies. And I jumped ahead and I actually revealed 2 at a time here, but we're going to talk about them from most to least effective. All right, so as you're thinking about your teams and how they ask questions, just kind of think about where they fall in across these strategies. Okay, so the number 1 questioning strategy really is questioning to needs and wants. So not only do what your clients need, right? What do they need to buy, but why do they need it? Why do they want it? What is that underlying emotion attached to it? The second most effective is going to be needs and at least buying process, right? So you're identifying what they need, and at least you understand, or your sellers understand, how that buying process is going to take place, how that decision is going to be made. Especially important right now as buying processes are getting more complex. Next, and I have a slow mouse, there we go, product-based questions. So this is really about asking enough questions to be able to spec a product or service and include it in a proposal or quote. So just the basics of what your customer needs. And then our least effective would be simply asking some intro questions and then pitching a product. So you're not really understanding deeply any needs, any wants, maybe not even getting enough information to really do a full-scale proposal or quote. So that's going to be the least effective questioning strategy. And in our sales leader trend report, we asked sales leaders where most of their sales teams really fell in terms of their questioning skills. And we're going to reveal the results in just a minute. But Corey, you've got a lot of experience working with sales teams. How do these kind of play out in the teams that you work with? What are your thoughts on these questioning strategies?
So number 4 is absolutely the one that I see the most. And that's the reason why it's also the least effective. This is the one where they feel that if they are an expert on their product, they can show up, and again, pardon the pun, but they can show up and throw up, right? So they can simply talk and tell all about what the product is, and they think that's going to be enough. But if we revert over to item number 1, I love that you said emotion, particularly when we think about the wants. Emotion is so powerful. For some reason, emotion has gotten a bad rap in the workplace. But the more that we know, the more that we understand that human connection, that one-to-one, that authenticity is really why people make buying decisions. Needs are the bare minimum that someone wants, but that emotion, the want, is where people start to buy the high dollar, high ticket, or the high quantity of products. So wants are so important. Number 2 is pretty critical as well, because you have to understand who has the money and also where and how their timeline is, what their milestones is. So they're all important. Number 1 and 2 are super critical to make sure that you understand when that urgency, when that buying decision happens, and why it's going to happen because of number 1, that emotion, that lever, that trigger event.
Yes, yes. Really what you're doing is just kind of taking those skills as you move from especially 3 to 2 to 1, you're just going deeper and you're expanding your opportunities, going from perhaps a narrow opportunity or sale to something that could be broader or deeper or wider. we had a question come in, and someone was asking, I think, asking for a better definition of discovery questions. And so when we're talking about questioning skills, when we're talking about discovery questions, what we're really talking about is kind of the meat of the sales conversation. This is where a salesperson should be uncovering whether or not there's an opportunity for them within that particular account, and what that customer might buy, why they might buy it, what that process is for the customer to make that decision. So it's really discovering the needs, the wants, the what and the why of what that customer would buy. All right, so as we just were alluding, organizations are leaving significant potential revenue on the table based on how they are asking questions. So of those 4 strategies that we just showed you and talked about, based on our research, 54% of successful teams, so those are teams that are meeting or exceeding their previous year's revenue goals, are using the 2 most effective questioning strategies versus 33% of underperforming teams. So the teams that are meeting and exceeding goals are using those needs and wants questions. They're using those needs and buying process questions. So they're asking better, deeper questions, and they are more successful. That's compared to 66%, so 2/3 of the underperforming teams that are using the least effective questioning strategies. They're focusing on just those product-based questions. They're focusing on just those introductory questions and a product pitch. Corey, does this surprise you at all? What are your thoughts on this?
You know what? It doesn't surprise me. It's good to see it in glaring black and white, if you will, in terms of what the statistics are. There was actually a question in the chat that I think leads nicely into this, which is that a lot of customers themselves have impatience, and so they are expecting you to perform and to ask questions up front and quickly. And what I'll share is they are more likely willing to go on the journey with you and allow you some space to ask questions if you are building a rapport with them and if you understand their behavioral style. So understanding how they want to be communicated with. And I like to think of it like food, right? So if you were you were inviting a VIP to your table, and if they wanted a prime rib and you served them tuna fish, right? You're communicating in a way where they want it very brief, because that's not what they want. So the more that they can understand what more that you understand what the style is, the more they're going to be open to going through the journey and finding out what the value is that's connecting to that. So when we think about 66% of underperforming teams are using the least effective strategy, well, they are leaving money on the table because they haven't really found out what the moneymaker is. And so they've been what I call either a happy puppy or they've been a shark. And so they smelled blood in the water, they had that feeding frenzy, and oh, I have something that I can solve, and they solved that problem and walked away. But had they have asked 2 or 3 more questions or been deeper in the well, they might have found out that there were 4 things that their company could have solved, not just the one. And so instead of maybe a $10,000 sale, maybe it could have been $100,000 or $1 million in total revenue in building together the right recommendation, the right solution based on what the customer needs. So it is a delicate balancing act on how you ask the questions. But the good news is, Michelle, we've got some tips on how they can ask those good questions coming up. So
That's right. That's right. And one other little stat that I'm going to throw out there, yes, 54% of successful teams use one of the 2 most effective questioning strategies. Our research also showed that 32% of successful teams, so almost 1/3 of them, are still relying on those product-based questions. So just because, if you're, for your leaders out there, as you're looking at your teams, and maybe you did hit goal, maybe you exceeded goal in previous years, but still ask yourself about the quality of the questioning. Is there room for improvement? Are they still leaving money on the table? So even if you are successful, even if your teams are successful, there are still opportunities to improve.
yeah. That is such a powerful statement that you had. I like to use sports references. Even those players in the NBA and the NFL and the NHL, they all still have coaches. So they're at the top of their craft, and there's still points they can do to improve. So always look on how you can be better.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be talking about coaching and how to coach to these skills coming up in just a few minutes. So that's a nice kind of lead in there. As we talk about questioning skills, just want to show you, this is the impact process. This is our sales process. Think about the sales process if you have your own already, where questioning skills fit in, right? And it's typically a central part of that sales process. Corey, do you want to just kind of walk us through this really quickly?
Absolutely. So when we think about the sales process here, you notice that we have the blue and the orange. So when we think about the investigate, meet, and probe, this is where we are seeking to understand. So I would say 70% of your time is really setting the stage on how you can understand your customer, to really understand their business, again, their needs, their wants, their whys. When we think about the time that you're going to spend, it's not about how you close. If I had a nickel for every time somebody asked me, Corey, tell me what the magic words are that'll help me be like a sales dynamo. And I'm going to tell you that's not how you're going to win. You win business by how you ask questions. You win or you lose in probe or discovery. And again, that's 70% of your time when we think about investigate, meet, and probe understanding. The last part is now we go 30% of the time that you can fast act once you understand the foundation of what they want and need. And so that's where apply talks about the value. Convince is if you have to overcome any objections, anything that you don't know to help sway the scale in your direction. And tie it up is, of course, how do we get that dotted line, cross all the T's, dot all the I's, and make sure everything has a nice pretty bow on top of it. But by far and wide, Michelle, probe, probe, probe. Dig to understand.
Absolutely. You hit on such an important point. And for those of you out there, if you're thinking about your teams and think they have a closing problem, I would encourage you to look at their questioning. You may have a questioning problem. It's what comes before, and that probe step is so critical. All right, so let's dig in, Corey. Let's talk about some strategies on asking better questions.
Love it.
All right, Corey, you and I were talking before this session, and I love that this is a quote from Corey: surface level questions get surface level answers. To me, this just says it all. We find that in our own assessment, so we have a selling skills index that will evaluate your team's knowledge of their sales skills within the context of the sales process. What we find are those questioning skills across the board, pre-training, they have the lowest average. That is the area that we find teams can improve the most across the board.
Yeah.
And Corey, I've also heard you say this: sellers think they're better at questioning than they are. Tell us more.
Yeah, so I'm laughing over here because if anybody's ever been in any programs with me, they know that that's my mantra. Is surface level questions get surface level answers, but particularly that sales skills, or excuse me, probing skills are lacking. Most salespeople that I come across think that they are excellent at asking questions. They think that they ask like the most complex Mensa level, Harvard level, MBA question. They are superior at it. But it goes back to what I said earlier, that there is a blessing in tenure and there is a curse in tenure. And how can both of those things be true? And the fact of the matter is they ask enough questions to allow them to do what they already want to do, is to talk.
Right.
So they want to be the one that's doing the majority of the talking and sharing about their product, and they want to be on stage. But the fact is, the least amount of time you're on stage, the more that you put your client on stage, the better off you are about getting below the surface. Yes, Terry, I love what you wrote. Performing. They want to do the whole jazz hands and song and dance and the whole thing, and it makes them feel great about themselves. sales. Let's not pretend that sales individuals, and I'm one of them, so I can say this without a reprisal, hopefully, salespeople tend to have a lot of ego. And so that ego allows them to be the ones to show up, right? And to be the star of the show. We must make the customer the star of the show. How are we allowing them to look great at their companies? How can we show or find out what's the with them, what's in it for them so they can be the star? That's our job. Our job is to raise them up.
Yes, yes. And Jose, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to use them in proportion. Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit more even about listening as we go. I do think, to your point on veteran salespeople, there's a tendency to become complacent, as Lisa said, and to make assumptions. And questioning is a really good way to verify your assumptions, right? Or just dig a little bit deeper even. So being customer focused versus seller focused. So that wants and needs, right? That tends to be a little bit more focused on what the customer wants versus that end goal of just closing the sale, which tends to be seller focused. Expand on that if you don't mind, Corey.
Yeah, so if you are focusing on the customer, and if you are not being myopic, thinking only about yourself, the end goal will take care of itself. So if you're asking the questions and finding a way again to highlight them, and to really get below the surface. So you look at this image here, and we're talking about surface level questions. We want to get below the deep blue sea. Right? Again, the tip of the icebergs are the needs. What really makes customers buy and what makes them buy a lot and over again is when they feel heard and understood. And if you don't take the time to feel to make sure that they feel heard and understood, somebody at some point in time in that sales relationship will, and you'll lose the sale or you will lose the relationship. So the more you are able to dig deeper and dig for gold, mining for gold, going below, going deep in the blue sea, that is how we take care of our end goal, because we are focusing on the customer, their wants and their needs.
Yeah. I think that even ties back to that comment earlier about, sometimes customers will only let you ask a couple of questions and want to move on. And I think maybe, you mentioned, Corey, behavior styles and adapting to that, your customer style. But I also think, in addition to that, that customers know when you're truly interested in what they have to say, as you're saying, versus, all right, I just need enough information to write this quote, get this sale, and move on. And they can tell. And so I think there's more of an interest in engaging with your sellers if they're showing true interest.
Yeah. I agree with that, Michelle, so much. And I'll also, we talked about this a little bit when we talked about value selling. Customers are more educated, they're more informed than ever before. And so they come to us with maybe a greater degree of impatience because they feel like they already know what the solution is and they want us just to provide it. But what we find is, and I mean, how many of you are guilty of this, that you are a 30-second Google expert? So you put something in the search engine, you get one result and you already think you know the answer. So you don't. By the way,
right.
That's not a thorough result, not a thorough investigation. And so, yes, Erin, me too, guilty. So it's all about helping them understand that they don't know as much as they think that they do. And therefore, they need to allow you to ask questions to get them the best solution, not just what will get them by. We want to do better than that. We want to strive for better than that.
Right. Yeah. Lisa feels very seen. Google University. Yes. All right. So Corey, surface level questions and, trying to get deeper. How does this play out in a more transactional type sales environment? Maybe it's a one-call close versus a relationship kind of or consultative sales environment.
Yeah, so by nature of the two different types of sales cycles, relationship sellers maybe tend to ask a little bit more questions, but still there's still room to improve. Again, all of us are there.
Yeah,
Transactional sellers may think, well, I know that I'm selling screws, I know that I'm selling pins or whatever it might be. So I just have to put the catalog in front of them and go. I'm going to tell you no. There's still need to take the time and dig deeper because now we want to consider again that share of wallet. So, do you know if you are exclusively working with them in that product line? Do you know if there's anything adjacent that you could help them with to build that really high level trusted advisor, strategic resource relationship? So ultimately, we still want to slow them down to make sure that we're thorough and not assume that it's only this quantity, this type, or whatever it might be. There is still more meat on the bone to be gained. So, whether you're transactional or relationship, everyone could benefit from asking deeper questions, more insightful questions, and taking it through to find out their why behind it. What's their trigger, and what are they going to be recognized for on these buying decisions?
yeah, I think that's a great point. All right, so now let's talk about really the power of simple, right? I think we may think, and you alluded to this at the very beginning of this session, is that we think questions have to be complicated or, as you said, Mensa level, right? Extremely, over engineered, complicated, Harvard level. But there's power in simplicity, in just asking very simple questions. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that some more.
Yeah. So if you've ever heard the phrase baffle them with brilliance, don't do that. Do not
Yeah.
resist the urge. Um, you do not have to ask, as I said before, the most complex 10-part, subpart A, subsection C question to show how brilliant you are, again, to make you the star. The goal is to extract information to understand what your customer values so you can give them the right solution, right? Again, to help them meet their needs and ultimately getting below the surface to what they want. So when you think about the power of simplicity, so all right, well, Corey, you're telling us that we need to ask more questions, but I don't know what else to ask. Pretty much any question under the sun can be followed up by how so? Tell me more about that. Can you expand on that? Can you give me an example? So if I were even to ask you, tell me about your favorite sandwich, it's bologna and cheese, or it's ham and cheese, or it's something Gouda and Gruyere and some kind of delicate, decadent sandwich. Well, tell me about how you arrived at that type of sandwich as your favorite thing. So simply anything that you ask, how did that impact you? Tell me more, invites a story. So one of the questions that we heard earlier is, well, my customers only allow me to say three, and then they get impatient. They want to hear more. If you are inviting a story and saying, share with me, and how so? How did that impact you? Can you expand on that? Can you tell me more? They are encouraged to share more details that will give you more information for you to make again the best recommendation. So keep it simple. You don't have to have anything really complex worked out. Just follow up and take it further. Go as far
Yeah.
as you can.
Yeah. I think that's one of the most important skills, those follow-up questions. And, my particular favorite, that's interesting. Tell me more. I mean, you can say that to any follow-up comment, and it just really broadens that conversation. So I think this is as simple as it is. I think we find in the clients that we work with and the sellers that we train that these types of follow-up questions really are kind of the gold, right? It's the hidden gem in getting deeper with your customers.
Yeah. Michelle, before we go into this next piece real quick, there was a comment or a question that was made from Ryan about how does enthusiasm tie into all of this?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm going to say is enthusiasm, passion is very important. because you care. So it's about how you're listening, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
If we were to treat our customers or potential prospects the more like we listen to our friends. When our friends are talking to us, even about the simplest things, we tend to hang on every word, and we ask those follow-up questions with gusto because we really do want to know the answer. We legitimately care. We need to be the same when we are thinking about our customers. We want to be enthusiastic. We want to be passionate about what's causing them pain, about what their challenges are. We want to be enthusiastic about how we can solve it and how we are excited about that, because excitement and passion is pervasive. It follows, it flows, it's contagious. That's a better word, it's
Right.
contagious. So we want to make sure that we are able to give them that feeling, again, that connectivity in the relationship.
Totally, totally agree. I think that's a fabulous point. And thank you, Ryan, for bringing that up. And thank you, Corey, for expanding on it. As we look at sales discovery questions, skills, and strategies, we're going to kind of break some of these down. But what I'd love to hear from you all in the chat, tell us, as you look at what's on the screen here, there's 8 different kind of skills and strategies. What resonates with you the most in terms of questioning skills in your own experience or with your teams? Where do you see your teams struggling the most? Are there any here where you just look at these and go, yes, open-ended questions or listening? I mean, we've been talking a little bit about listening, but Corey and I are curious, really want to see what resonates with you all from this list. And while we're, looking at what our audience is sharing, Corey, let's talk about a few of these. Open-ended questions, obviously. I mean, we
Yeah.
talk about that a lot, but I think sometimes it's harder to do that for sellers. They kind of get into that yes, no mode.
Yeah. So I want to take us back to, again, I'm being a broken record about, again, the blessing and the curse of tenure, specifically when it comes to number one. So when we think that we already know what the answer is, we may ask a close-ended question because we already know what it's going to be and we're trying to propel them down our pathway. Well, open-ended questions just get you so much more information. And I think that there's also an old school rule about don't ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. I think that is antiquated thinking. It's our job to be mentally nimble. When we think about the different directions. So when we start to force them down our pathway, that again is giving us opportunity to leave money on the table or leave opportunities on the table. So it's got to be open-ended. We've got to be quick on our feet, the ability to switch on a dime. And even if you're a veteran, take the time to prepare. So before you walk into the meeting, write down 5 or 6 questions that you think are going to be critical to finding out to help you remember, giving you a roadmap on where to go. So prepare ahead of time. Don't just show up and wing it. Be better than that. Professionals prepare.
Yeah, yeah. We're getting a lot coming in the chat, Corey. I mean, it seems like a lot of these are resonating. We're getting a lot of number 2, ask follow-up questions. We kind of talked about that a little bit on the previous slide, but going deeper. Cameron says, I think my team struggles with 2. They'll encounter an objection and just say, okay, I'll check in next month instead of asking why and combating it. And I think that's a good point because asking questions, not just in discovery, but asking questions can be great in managing objections and understanding, where that's coming from. And let's see, Lisa says that she gets so excited sometimes that she will interrupt. And not to take over, but just to, just from the enthusiasm. So I think that's, we understand, Lisa, your intentions are pure.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
I could make a comment there, I don't tend to remember statistics, so I don't spew them quite readily. And I wish I could tell you the source of this one. But when it comes to interruptions, every time you interrupt someone, they tell you 25% less. and that 25% is stackable each time you do it. And so when you think about a story, you know, you're starting off at 100% and then you interrupt them, you're down to 75 and then 50. And so you're missing out on the details. Because if you think about the way that a conversation flow goes, think about it again, like forget work for a moment and think about you talking one-to-one with your friends. When they interrupt you, what likely happens is the flow of the conversation pivots. And so now you start talking about something else or something in a different way. And so it doesn't go backwards into what you were getting information on. So I say that those of us that are enthusiastic, and again, I'm gonna tell on myself, I'm an interrupter too. I'm working on it. I'm in recovery, 12-step program. You've got to put that happy puppy on a leash and take the note and write down what they said that had you so excited, and go back after they're finished and ask those questions. But avoid interrupting. I know it feels like, well, I'm just passionate, I'm excited. We talked about that. But in this case, it's detrimental. It doesn't serve you.
Yeah, yeah, great point. Let's dig into 3 and 4 a little bit more if we can. So avoid those leading questions. I know you mentioned earlier, you don't, there's the conventional wisdom of not asking a question that you don't already know the answer to. But if you could just expand on that one a little bit more.
So when we think about the leading questions, you know, again, we think that if we guide them down the path that we want them to be, then that's a better solution. And again, salespeople get compensated on really the complexity of our job, the difficulty of our job. Guiding them down a path that you already know is the answer is simply limiting your opportunities to fully understand the customer. And so whether or not there is a greater opportunity, again, a greater share of wallet, a greater manifestation of what you can do with this customer, they need to feel heard. And so treating them like they're on the cattle train and trying to get them to go in the circle in the path that you want is just not a good idea for the relationship. It's not getting down to their why. So try not to lead them down where you want them to go. You can narrow it down in terms of eliminating things that don't work, but allow them to tell their story the way they need to tell the story. That's very important in that connectivity, that human one-to-one. And people buy from people that they feel connected to. It's a human psychology, right? So that's the way that we tend to make relationships and our buying decisions on, do we feel comfortable? And if we can feel that we're being guided down a path, it's sales stink. You see, I touched my nose, so it's like it smells stinky. It feels uncomfortable, and we don't want to stink to our customers.
No stinking, no stinking.
No stinking.
No stinking. All right, so let's talk about keeping questions focused strategically. We know that asking those product-based questions, we talked about that being one of the lesser effective questioning strategies. We know we have to ask some to understand, what the right recommendation is going to be. But what advice do you have for kind of keeping the questions at a more strategic level?
Yeah, so I'm gonna say it's not always the what. We are very focused on the what because we want to narrow it down to what's the product, what's the one service that we could sell. But we really want to think more about the how. So how does our solution, how does our opportunity fit within their structure, within their objectives? So once we know more about what the strategic vision is for the organization, then that is power. So again, knowledge is power, and so that allows us to put forth the right solution and also think maybe strategically ahead, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. That helps us to strategically build a trench around and protect our business with the customer. So don't think, again, laser focused one vision. Think more umbrella. What is the broader scope of what we can provide and what we can understand and learn?
Yeah. Great. Thank you. We've gotten some comments on embracing silence. And several people have chosen that one. As a one that really resonates. I think it's kind of hard sometimes to sit in silence, especially as a salesperson. You want to fill that silence with talking. advice on that one?
So on this one, I'm going to switch this to the virtual world for a moment, because I think that it's even more difficult, and maybe for me, maybe for others, it's more difficult to embrace the silence when you're on like a Zoom or a Teams or a WebEx type of call. When you're face to face in person, there is a more natural ability. It still can feel awkward, but there's a more natural opportunity to read the room on, should I let this silence sit, or do I need to interject? But when you're virtual, it feels like time goes on forever. Like when you have that silence seems to linger in like dead air. When actually time is time. It's the same amount of time, but we feel like we have to fill the space much more. So particularly when you're in a remote situation on camera, what I say to myself is breathe one, breathe two, and then I pause again and see if they're going to answer, because they need the time to think. And so giving them a moment to ask the question, and then resist the urge to give the answer or move on. Maybe simply ask the question again. So you are showing, I really do want an answer to this. But it may sound silly, but breathe one, breathe two, gives it a moment to calm myself, take a deep breath so I don't just blurt out something because I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that. And I love resist the urge to answer the question yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's another one I think probably many of us struggle with. And then taking notes. You alluded to that earlier, but take notes.
Yeah.
Take notes. I mean, that's, how you remember what they're telling you is important. We like to talk about stars, put a star, by the points that you want to come back to, or if there's a problem that you can solve that, you don't want to jump into talking about your product or service yet, put a star. And that's a good way to kind of keep track. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that as well, Corey.
I do. I love telling stories, so I'm going to try to tell this one super fast. If any of you are Netflix fans, there is a episode on a series called The Mind Explained, and it talks about memory. And so when it comes to taking notes, as soon as early as up to an hour after a conversation or an event has happened, we can lose or forget up to 50% of the details. So if we think about showing up to our customers and having a follow-up meeting, and we tried to rely on our memory and not what we put in our notes, then what we go back to ask them, we may have to ask them the same questions. And so that leads to their frustration. That leads to why they may only let us ask 3 questions, or why they never let us come into their office again, because it's Groundhog's Day doing the same thing over and over again. So take notes, not only to make sure that you're forwarding on the sales process to the next phase, but also to make sure that you are remembering the details correctly, because the brain also doesn't like holes. And so what we don't remember, we fill in the spaces, which could be inaccurate. So yes, The Mind Explained, and there are several different pieces in the series. The one that I'm talking about is specifically about memory and the brain when it comes to The Mind Explained. Very important, very good stuff.
Awesome. Excellent. I'm going to check that out because
Yeah.
I've not seen that, but that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about how to coach better sales discovery. So we've talked about, what are some of those questioning skills. Now let's talk about, from a leadership management perspective, how do we coach to that? And I think this one right here, Corey, is a tough one. Observe and let them fail.
I feel the belly pain on looking at this, but it's important. What happens for sales leaders is when you are doing a ride along, a joint call, you're brought in as a SME for an opportunity, that subject matter expert, you feel the need to save your salesperson. You can see them running into an area that's either going to cause a problem, or they're leaving money on the table. And so we try to save the sale by jumping in. The fact is, they do not learn by you saving them. Lessons, diamonds are built through pressure. The best lessons are the ones that you fail forward by learning from the lesson. And if you learn from it, then it's not a failure. But if you know someone is always going to swoop in and save you, what are you learning in that? You're learning how to be saved.
Yeah.
You're not
Yeah, I
learning
think,
how to be better. Yeah.
right. Great point. All right. So coaching, verifying the 5 characteristics of a qualified opportunity. So do you mind expanding on that one?
Absolutely. So when we think about what those characteristics of a qualified opportunity are, these are the questions that we want to make sure that we are understanding, so that we are qualifying and not chasing our tails. We know that we have only a limited amount of time in the day. So we have to think about, am I chasing the right type of business? Am I at the right place in the sales cycle? And as a coach, is this opportunity as vetted as my salesperson thinks that it is? Or has it been in their pipeline in Salesforce for 180 days when your sales cycle is 30 days? And so again, it's starting to stink. So we're talking about that
Yep.
sales stink. Well, now it's stinky in a different way. That cheese has been out on the shelf for too long and it's funking up your house. So we want to stop it from being stinky. So those 5 characteristics of a qualified opportunity are is there a need? Are they aware of it? Is there trust there? Is there budget? Are they willing to listen to you? So thinking through the opportunity of really, really understanding what the logistics are in that relationship. I think I listed all 5.
Yes. And sense of urgency.
Sense of urgency. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. So asking coaching questions, and we have a slide actually coming up that has some coaching question examples on that, so we can expand on that one more in just a moment. And then we talk about use reporting tools, things like Gong, for instance. I think. Yeah. Thoughts on that?
So here's my thoughts. Recording tools, recording and reporting tools, salespeople by nature get paranoid.
Yeah.
They get uncomfortable. I encourage you as a leader to position recording tools and a reporting tool as a coaching element, not as a gotcha. So it is your leadership style that leads them to have that fear with coaching. If you are using those tools as a punitive message, then it's not going to work for you. If you're using it as again, like an athlete has a shooting coach or a position coach or something to help them gain skills, you are pointing to opportunities to have a conversation with them about, well, take a look at this. Tell me about what you would have done differently if you were in this situation again, or read the customer's reaction. Did you get the reaction that you were hoping for? What could you do differently that would have gotten a different reaction from them or led you down to what you were trying to get? But if you're trying to catch them in a gotcha moment, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important. We also got a comment about using those recording tools as training modules for new salespeople. So I think that's a great option as well, especially if you've got team members that are doing really well and you want to show that as an example. And then we also talk about completing a joint call audit. That is a tool that we use in our coaching and sales management training programs, more of a checklist, obviously to kind of help evaluate and coach. Corey, thoughts on the joint call audit, or really, any other thoughts on any of these points that we're talking about here?
Yeah, regarding the joint call audit, what I really like about that is it gives you structure to the call and reminds you what to look for. As a leader, when we're in these opportunities and we're observing and looking for things, we can often get caught up in the subjective. So often thinking about what we like or think are good things, really often based on how we would be doing it if we were in that seat. So the joint call audit helps to keep you objectional and really thinking about neutral. So thinking through how we're thinking at in a neutral way instead of thinking about it towards one thing, and making sure that we're listening for all the different parts of the sales cycle, the sales call, from building rapport, putting them at ease, asking the right questions, how are they handling objections. It's just important to understand what to look for. And
Yeah.
also a written documentation so that your salesperson doesn't feel that it was just made up or no, that didn't happen. This is also documentation you want to share with them so that you are keeping a record and a file, again, not for punitive purposes, but for developmental purposes, so they can understand and see how they're growing in their process as a professional as well.
Right, right. I love that. Constructive, developmental, not punitive.
Yeah.
Whoop. Sorry about that. I have the mouse that wants to skip ahead. So I said we would talk about probe coaching questions. And so here are a few coaching questions that can be used for coaching kind of these questioning skills. I'm sure, Corey, you even have a few more, but these are, I think, a good start for facilitating a conversation with your salesperson around the probe step or the questioning skills or what they're uncovering in their conversations with their clients.
Yeah. So what I'll share about this is what many of the sales leaders on this call today will recognize when you start preparing for those joint calls and ride-alongs is your salespeople are not preparing. Again, they are assuming a lot of details, and again, they are scratching the surface level questions, getting surface level results. What you want to put them in the mind of is being more strategic. If you think about a musician, they don't show up for a concert without making sure all of their instruments are tuned and they have their music and they're prepared. A basketball player doesn't go to a game without knowing what his opponents tend to do, what their plays are, scouting reports, etc. This is helping them think as a professional. You want to be prepared for these things, particularly when we think about what a competitive situation might be. What we know that we are dealing with, if it's maybe a price competitive, or knowing that we have features that are superior to what our competitors have, or if we know going into it that maybe there is a challenge with ours comparatively, how can we show and highlight value that allows us to win? What are they wanting is the outcome. This is the one that really gets me, Michelle, is the desired outcome for the call after the sale is done. Well, how do you think that call went? Oh, it went great. Great. Well, tell me what it went. Oh, we had a good conversation. We always get along well. We were there for an hour. None of those things relate to an outcome or an objective that follows or that furthers the sale. So before going in the door, you should know, what are your objectives? What are you trying to get out of this? Is this a closing call? Is this getting more contacts? Is this understanding their buying process? You have to know what the rules of the game is so that you can say, did I win or did I lose? Did I do well in this call? Just saying it went great. That's not beneficial.
Right. Well, then that leads into, well, what's your recommended next step? Well, it was a great call. We're going to catch up in a month or so. Well, do you have an appointment? Are there agreed upon actions that need to take place?
Yeah.
And, how do you know you're moving forward if you don't have that?
Yeah. So what I like to say is it's the DNS. So it's the definitive next step, right? Because I want to know my next meeting is at Wednesday at 2:00. And this is specifically what I'm going to provide, and they agree, and it is time stamped. So I want to know definitively what was agreed upon that you are walking away from. Not, as you said, Michelle, not that I'm going to get back to you shortly, or I'll get back to you with some information, what information and when. So being very specific about what that next step is.
Right. Absolutely. Totally agree. Excellent. All right. We've got some time for some Q&A, and I'm going to put this screen up here, some resources for you all to learn more. We have a download for 13 winning questions. We've got a couple of blogs here on discovery questions, best types of sales questions. Be excited to take your questions as well. So add those in either to the chat or the Q&A. And Corey, I have one that popped up in the chat a few minutes ago. Would love to get your take on this. So Lisa says, what type of questions are best to ask after you send the proposal? You've asked great questions throughout the sales process, and now that you've sent the proposal, the customer is silent and not responding. What are the best questions to get them to respond and close?
Yeah, so I apologize in advance because what I'm going to say is not probably what you want to hear. And what I'm going to say is this goes back to what I said about the closing. How do I close more business? How do I close is the wrong question. So to me, the question to ask is what would I have said? What should I have said before I got to this point to ensure that they did not go silent? And so these are, again, getting the definitive next steps and asking questions such as, if I present you with the right recommendation, are you prepared to move forward? Or what are the steps and stages that we would go through to make a buying decision? Or again, getting that definitive next step to say that now that I've submitted to you this information, can we meet again on Wednesday at 2:00 to discuss what our next steps are going forward? So it's getting that commitment for what happens next is important, because if you don't do that, it is difficult to find a way to get them back into the fray. Just because you do it also doesn't mean that it's going to work with 100% viability, right? So you could still have an appointment on the calendar and they could miss it or have to reschedule it, and then all of a sudden you get into crickets and silence. So in that event, I'll do my best to actually answer your question here, is I would say, based on our conversation, I would list off the things that you starred and checked, or what they had valued in, what the benefit they said. So if I recall correctly in our conversation, you said that you were interested in A, B, and C. Based on the recommendation I gave you, here's how it meets your needs. Has anything changed in terms of your need, your opportunity to work with you? Has anything changed that I should be aware of to find out if that's going to trigger some type of response? So
yeah, great answers on that, Corey. 100% agree. You know, being able to review that with them in person is, or at least virtually, you know, whether it's over Zoom or something, is so important in terms of being able to get feedback right then. Another question that's come in, this is from Susie. What type of questions can she ask during a cold call to discover customer needs without sounding salesy? What are your thoughts on that?
So that one really depends on where you are in the relationship, or whether it was an inbound lead or someone that you found. Because ultimately, one of the things that I like to know, if it's cold and you haven't had any kind of conversation, is what is it that brought them to you today? So if I've been calling you for weeks and months, Susie, I want to know. So what was it about my last message that got you to agree to sit with me today? Tell me about what's going on. I like to know the whys and wants of it to really understand the lay of the land. If they're using any type of competitive product or service, I like to know what they're currently doing about their situation that they like. I always start with the positive, and then I also want to find out what is it that they're not liking, or if they could build the ultimate machine or widget, you know, what would that thing have that would really be the value plus. So trying to find out, again, the reason what prompted them to reach out to you, and then what are they currently using, and the whys and the wants of it. So those are critical questions that I would ask Susie.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. A question from Armand. What is your feeling about confirming follow-up appointments a day or two beforehand? Is there a difference to this with the time between the last meeting and the next one? I think I know probably where you're going to go with this, Corey, but I'm going to let you take it. Thoughts on confirming follow-up appointments, and should the timing of that confirmation differ based on, I guess, where you are in the process?
Yeah, I confirm every appointment. I'm
I knew
gonna
you'd
tell
say
you,
that.
yeah. I will tell you, earlier in my sales career, I did not. And the reason why I think you're probably asking, and probably a question that others have as well, is, well, I don't want them to cancel. I don't want them to back out of the appointment. And I'm here to tell you that information is power. And if they were looking for an excuse to cancel the appointment, that's information that you need to know on where they value you and where they value their priority in the relationship. So confirm, confirm, confirm. The other thing is that when you are confirming that appointment, I would always update with the agenda and say, here is the recommended topics that I plan to talk, and then list them out in a bullet form, and then ask them if there's anything else that they want to add to this to make sure that you're able to prepare effectively. And then I would also ask them if there's anyone else they think would benefit from attending the meeting as well. So you're also trying to eliminate surprises if there's different titles, different levels that are coming into the room. So definitely confirm your appointment, because guess what? Your time is just as valuable as theirs is. So if they were going to no show or cancel on you, you need to be able to refill your calendar with somebody who really truly is committed to the buying process.
Yeah, thank you. Great advice. I'm going to do one more question, and then we're at the end of time, and we'll need to wrap up. Cameron, this is referring to the question that you just answered previous around questions on cold calling. Cameron says that her salespeople do inside sales, so they're doing calling, voicemails, emails. So a lot of the sales process is via email, which can be harder to navigate when there's a breakdown. How does the advice that we have shared today in questioning skills, does it change? Does it stay the same when you're thinking about email communication, right? So when you're asking questions and trying to do discovery by email, is there any advice that you would offer that would be different, or would you say would be the same as what we've shared today?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna admit that that's a tough one. I'd actually like to think about this one a little bit more, but since we've got a few minutes here, what I would say is it may change the back and forth that you have. And so what I would say is the way that you phrase maybe the initial question, because you may not be able to go 3 deep with the how so and then tell me more and can you expand on that. You can do some, but it may be a little bit limited. But I would start your questions written with the tell me about or share with me, because instead of saying what or how or when, that leads to a very brief, succinct answer. And so simply putting the word tell me about or share with me puts the weight on them to share more. And so maybe by doing that, you'll get 2 or 3 levels deep in a response versus a succinct yes, no, black, white answer, close-ended.
Yeah, I love that advice. It kind of softens email communication. You can lose things in translation a little bit. So that kind of provides a little bit more framing of the questions as well. I know in some of our training, we talk a lot about behavior styles, how to recognize behavior styles, even by email. And that can be a guide for how to frame your emails. Some people want them very short and bullet pointed. Others want things to be a little bit more expansive. So if you've got any context around that, that can also help you craft emails, whether it's questions or even just, regular communication back and forth. That could be a help as well. So I want to thank you, Corey, for a wonderful, informative hour of content around sales questioning. It is so much fun. It's always fun to do these sessions with you. So thank you for sharing your knowledge today.
My pleasure. This is such a great topic, and Michelle, I love working with you, so it's a great joy.
Yes, we're going to do it again sometime. And I want to thank everybody here that joined us. We appreciate your attendance. Look for this recording to come out shortly. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.
Bye all.
Bye.